Child sexual exploitation wouldn't have escaped your notice. It's been all over the national press and was highlighted our lack of action, I think it's fair to say, on child sexual exploitation, and our overall understanding of it was flagged with the other 9 areas during the Ofsted improvement plan. What we have done is we have learned, we have watched, we've listened, and we have learned over the last 12 months, not only to the national picture, courtesy of Rotherham and the Serious Case Review in Oxford, but we've also learned locally with our increased understanding about what CSE is and how we need to tackle it. What we have determined from that learning is that we cannot mitigate the risk of child sexual exploitation by just looking at what we do in children's social care. And therefore what I have done with the support of Kim and colleagues right across the local authority and Councillor Green is put together a CSE action plan that looks at the work of the whole local authority, looks at the work of our partners, whether that be strategically or operationally, and indeed drawing from the end of that the learning and development that we need to take on as an organisation and with our partners in order to recognise, address that risk of child sexual exploitation and disrupt any potential harming behaviour that our children might be subjected to. The action plan is far-reaching. It's a brand new action plan and it's essentially still under development, and it develops every day as we learn more. It's not circulated at this stage, but what I have done is pulled out some of the new initiatives that we've been looking at with CSE and some of the developments that we've made. They are written in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions on that report. What I will say to you in terms of reassurance, we are raising awareness and we have been alerted to a 700% increase of children who might be at risk of CSE since December. So between December and March, that could be very low level risk. And when I talk about low level risk, that could be a child who's changed their use of the internet. So they may have changed their use of Facebook or Snapchat or something that's way more cool than that a child uses on their handheld device. That doesn't say that there is an increased risk of child sexual exploitation in Bournemouth. What it says is we are really working hard to raise awareness, to spot the signs very quickly. So where we have had, for example, 138 risk assessments, there are only 14 children that, in that period, being worked with by the police where offences have been committed. So we are being proactive and we're being preventative in our approach to CSE and how we're choosing to manage that. You will all be very excited, as am I, that Councillor Green is going to be fronting an awareness-raising campaign for us across the summer. Yes.
You've just been told.
And we're doing a lot of work with our colleagues in corporate comms to understand how we will help families protect their children and help children protect their peers from the risk of CSE, because we're very much angling our work and putting our efforts into the early intervention, the early awareness raising campaigns.
I was going to just look at item 19 within the report. So it says that the service is expected to be fully operational during the late summer of 2015. Can you just give us an indication as to whether that is on track?
Okay, that is a service that we're commissioning with our partners across Dorset. So we have a jointly commissioned service through our Access to Resources team and through Neil's unit. Bernardo's Base have many years of experience of dealing with sexual exploitation. They have been commissioned. It's a project that's been funded by ourselves, Poole, Dorset, Health and the police. We're equal partners in that commissioning. There have been some delays from Bernardo's perspective, mainly around recruitment, again, it's a dirty word, but just because that service for Bournemouth will be value added. That service is not Bournemouth's answer to their management of risk around CSE or missing children. It's the cherry on the cake. So in terms of reassurance, a service is being delivered to all of our children who are at risk at whatever level. Barnardo's will add greater value to the service that we're already delivering, so it matters little to us in Bournemouth that that service is delayed. We will get our value from it, but it'll be later in delivering than we would have anticipated.
Wonderful. Ren? Then Mr. John.
Are we including female genital mutilation and forced marriages in all this? Because that's a very big concern.
It will be part of that. It falls under the same LSCB subgroup. So CSE has many governance structures and strategic groups looking at all the elements of the work. Where it doesn't come through and is named specifically in there, it is part and parcel of the work that we're doing around CSE. What we've tried to do, and it's a conscious decision, is to move away from labels such as forced marriage and FGM, because we don't want people to believe that CSE is just those things, and there is an inherent risk when we talk about those areas of business that people forget about the lower level risk and the earlier work that we need to do. So the short answer would have been yes.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the question I had revolved around paragraph 8, which was this report from April 2015, report on corporate strategy policy performance, along about identifying areas of attention for public acts. And then over the page we've got new initiatives to cover all, not just as said there, but what followed. So what I would like to know is, unless I missed it somewhere, what that report from corporate strategy policy and performance actually had to say, so that we can make sure that everything's been covered.
That report was a report that was put together by Claire Matthews, and what that report did was it took out the learning from the Rotherham inspection report that was managed by Louise Casey and her team that went in to inspect Rotherham, and in the same way that the CSE action plan that I've prepared covers all of those issues from Rotherham, what Claire Matthews did was start to address those corporate issues through a report that has been to the corporate management team, and indeed that report has informed the CSE action plan. So Claire and I are getting to a point now where the CMT report and the CSE action plan are essentially becoming the same document, and the learning and the actions from that report and the learning and actions from children's social care are married into one plan for our management at risk.
Chair, my question is not around the fact that as we're here to scrutinise and make scrutiny, I would have wanted to actually see that full report, because otherwise we're just, excuse me, not that our officers aren't professional in this, but we need to see it for ourselves.
That's fine, we'll go to Jane.
Just to reiterate where we are with the action planning process, Anne-Marie has said that we're not at a stage yet to bring that to you. We would very much value you scrutinising the action plan, and which will incorporate the actions that are more corporate. It might be something that you would want to do, and with Councillor McQueen here, it's something that you might want to talk about corporate services, overview and scrutiny looking at as well. I wouldn't suggest you have two panels doing two bits of work, but it might be something you might want to consider doing jointly, because some of the issues, if you like, from Anne-Marie's perspective, are about managing the risk and what we're doing with our partners. From the corporate perspective, they're much more related to corporate governance. But together, they will form one action plan. And I think it would be most helpful to officers if the two chairs of those panels were to, perhaps outside of this meeting, consider how you would want to take that forward. It isn't ready yet, but I should imagine we'll probably, in the autumn be ready to bring something to you, and any advice that you want to give us on how you want to take that and consider that would be gratefully received.
So, take that forward. We will have that conversation, and then we'll come back to panel in, I don't know, October, November, when it's appropriate, and look at maybe doing a joint piece of work on that. Yeah, wonderful.
And if I may just...
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just a little concerned that there's so many agencies involved. I know we will have a chair looking over the well-being of everybody, but how will we secure that somebody doesn't let somebody down with information? I'm worried about the blame laying at somebody's doorstep, because you're only as good as the information that's being passed on to you.
We recognised that very early on, and we recognised that through Ofsted last year. And what we have been running for approximately 15 months now is we have a 6-weekly intelligence meeting where all of our partners who have identified any risk of children in CSE are invited to attend that meeting, and there are some additional partners there, so some of our colleagues from schools, substance misuse services, our police colleagues also attend the meeting. What that meeting aims to do is to make sure that the child is identified. We know that because they're at the meeting. The child is identified, the risk level is appropriate and is deemed correct by the panel members, that there is a lead professional that has a relationship with that child or young person in order that they can make any further disclosures or share any further information about risk to them or to their peers, that we monitor the escalation or the de-escalation of risk for those children to make sure that they're being appropriately maintained, and to make sure that as professionals we're learning from the situations that are arising, and all of the partners are familiar with the risk that as it lives in Bournemouth, and the actions that we need to take to do that. So we have looked at individuals through that meeting, we've looked at locations through that meeting, we've looked at any other areas of concern. So for an example, cars outside the schools perhaps, one-off locations, individuals of concern that we might want to share that information with the police. So we're preempting what some of our partners across Dorset are doing, and the fact that we're trying to lead the way on this, but what we're doing is recognising right back since last August that we don't want to fall foul of a Rotherham type issue, which is why I am confident that we are doing better with that because of the 700% increase that we've seen in risk assessments that have been submitted. So to give you an example, if we had 140 in 3 months in Bournemouth, I would still challenge the Rotherham perspective that they had 1,400 over a number of years. We had 140 in a matter of months. So that would say to me we're starting to get it right, we're starting to raise awareness appropriately, so we have all of those children in one place, if you like.
And there's one more tangent to that question. Are the public aware that the Town Hall and the officers here are working in conjunction with the police? Because my thought would be to report it to the police first off. How do we make the public aware that we're doing this immense work on that subject?
We have a circular route for information sharing, if you like, so information that would go into, there are different avenues in the police. There's an information avenue through Crime Stoppers, there's an information avenue through the 101 number, so if it gets reported to the police and it's not at their high level, then it would come to us. So we're closing the loop. So whatever source of information that's coming in, so we have a CSE mailbox in Bournemouth that people can submit their information to. The police have the 101 number or the Crime Stoppers number, so the information all filters through and eventually lands in the same place. The promotional literature that went out during the CSE week publicised all of those numbers, and our Pan Dorset colleagues' numbers as well. So for example, if a child is a Bournemouth child and the information gets reported through to Christchurch, we would get that from Dorset Social Services. And certainly how we share information, how we report this will be very much part of the campaign that we're hoping to run across the summer. We're not hoping to, we will be running across the summer to make sure we're not losing any information.
That sounds reassuring, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to come in on that last point that Anne-Marie made, and it really does sort of show one of the difficulties about CSE. I think we're getting very good at identifying those children who we might know anyway, who might be known to one of the agencies. What we are working on now, and it is a difficult message to manage, and I think the work we've done with comms has proved that that is a difficult message, is to say to people, it's okay to ask. In Bournemouth, we are not afraid to ask, and if the answer is, we've looked at it and actually it's fine, that's the message that we want to go out. We don't want this to be just something which is, everyone thinks as soon as you mention CSE, you are in a Rotherham situation, because you're not. There are so many levels and layers. On the other hand, as Anne-Marie will often say, if it doesn't feel right, it might well not be right. So it's finding the ways and approaching our residents and our public and our visitors in an appropriate way to say, please ask. It's right to ask. It's everybody's business. Don't hide from it. This is not, going back to what Anne-Marie first said, just a children's social care, just a policing issue. It's everybody's business. And that's where I think the corporate response will be very important, because we've got people putting out deck chairs on the beach. We've got people going into social housing. We've got people going increasingly into other businesses through our corporate and commercial activities. We need to take that corporate and general ownership of the issue, and also going back to what we were saying about adoption, and make sure that we make this work for Bournemouth, because what works for Rotherham, what works for Oxfordshire, is not what's going to work in Bournemouth. We have got a particular, we have many wonderful things which come with having a seaside economy. As we know, there are some negative things that have happened in some of our hotels. That's what happens with the tourist industry. Anne-Marie and I have been to Bournemouth Tourism Management Board and said, you do know this goes on, this could go on, this goes on everywhere. And they were very engaged with us. They want to know more. They want to have the right tools. They want to know that it's okay to pick up the phone, and that it won't suddenly mean that their hotel is surrounded by a load of sirens and the police marksman on the roofs. It's not, the approach needs to be proportionate, and that's where we're trying to extend this to say it's fine to be talking about it. We're very glad for the interest that this panel is taking, because the more we as members and co-opted members and officers take ownership of it, understand the complexities and the layers and the levels, the better that will be in order to protect our children.
I think that it's a very strong message. It's everybody's responsibility, isn't it? It's everybody, our friends, our family, our neighbours, the businesses that we go to. It's everybody's responsibility to ask that question. Does this feel right? Is that okay? Which leads me to the question that I've got here, and I'll come to you in just a moment, Don. Read in the newspapers recently about disarray within taxis. Now, they are the people that are picking sometimes those vulnerable people up from the station. Now, if they can't get their act together, and they are our first line of, actually, does this feel right? And what are we doing to sort of really get that message across to them that they should be asking that question, or Spidey says, this just doesn't feel right.
Firstly, as a reassurance, again, it's a nod to Rotherham and Oxford. We haven't, in 15 months now of looking at this in detail, had any recurring issues with taxi drivers in Bournemouth, so we don't have that same issue that's very well publicised. But that doesn't mean there is not a risk there. There were taxis used in a Bournemouth case that we've had. It wasn't the same taxi driver, it wasn't the same issue, there wasn't any recurrence, but taxis were part and parcel of the offending behaviour. Part of the action plan is looking at licensing and is also looking at the training for taxi drivers and part of what they need to go through in order to secure their licence. So I will be doing some work hopefully with the licensing panel going forward as well, and certainly we're looking at national training for taxi drivers. It's different right across the country, but what we would like to see in Bournemouth, and we need a champion for that, is that they do a CSE module, so an awareness raising module as part and parcel of their taxi training, which will give us some reassurance. But I need to emphasise again that we haven't, in looking at this in fine detail for a period now, noted any recurrent issues or anything that causes us concern for both taxi drivers.
Obviously I couldn't comment because I sit on the licensing committee, but I would certainly champion that with the licensing board and speak to the chair, Councillor Morgan, on that very issue. And over to you, Don.
Yes, I just wanted to just ask a question really on your paragraph 24 in the report concerning resources. You say that the resources to cover the response from Bournemouth for the CSE criteria is taken from the existing resources, obviously with the 50,000 added on from the growth bit. Given that this sounds like it's quite a large workload, what are the resources, how has it affected the rest of the workload that you've got in children's services as a result of what is clearly quite a lot of extra work if it's coming from the existing resources?
We are driven by our management of CSE to be very much business as usual, and that's our plan going forward. It is one element of safeguarding, it's one of many elements of safeguarding, and therefore, though we are giving it some dedicated attention, i.e. my attention and dedicated social worker in the immediate, I think the longer term we will leave, as long as there's a police CSE unit, we'll leave a social worker in there because the value that we're getting from children is excellent. In terms of resource, these children are largely known to universal services or they are known to specialist services, and we are managing CSE by raising awareness of practitioners and professionals that are already working with these children. It may well be that in the summer when we further raise awareness from children, peer-to-peer, or from parent to children, that there might be a different ask on resources, because largely now we're being alerted to this risk through professionals, so we know that there are professional relationships with those children. I have discussed at length over the last couple of months with Kim diversion of resources from my own service area, which is family support, into looking at CSE, because what we have learned in a very short period, i.e. from March to now, is the value that the social worker has given us at the high-end risk cases. I would like to see that same value delivered for some of the lower and the moderate and the lower risk cases. I appreciate that if I'm to do that, and to do that well, it will need a dedicated resource, because disclosures from some of these children take months and months, and ordinarily we would be closing those cases in children's social care before we got those disclosures. That's not safe for us, so we need to do things differently. So the resource would come from within, potentially, Family Solutions team, or turnaround resources, and it would have to come, I appreciate fully that that will have to come within resources, so there will be other areas of the business that we will need to do differently in order that we can do CSE differently. I get it, but I can see the value, so it's a case of value for money and looking at a holistic service, an end-to-end service, and how we best do that.
Indeed, yeah, thank you for that. I have one other question, if you don't mind, just on the appendix, very last paragraph, paragraph 9. We've got 11 children who are looked after in Bournemouth Borough Council who have been identified as being in risk. Without going specific clearly, how have they, can you give us some examples of how you've become aware of those, etc., and what are we planning to do with those children which we have a corporate responsibility for, please?
We have become aware of those children through the same mechanism as other children, and what we have asked our entire workforce to do in children's social care is to go back and to look at every single case that they're working with and identify with those children, complete a CSE risk screening tool. So they might be children who have increased internet usage or have started, their behaviour has changed, and it's the behavioural change that we're looking at. So that's not to say that those 11 children are subject or victims of criminal investigations or a high end. There are 2 looked after children, to my knowledge, and I'm looking at Lisa now, who's nodding, so I'm right. There are 2 looked after children who have been part of wider police investigations, but have de-escalated. So to my knowledge, as of yesterday, we didn't have children who are looked after children within the Operation Zeal, which is the police operational team that are looked after children in there. So I think 11 children who we're looking at as at risk, 11 lakh children that are at risk. There will probably be more, and actually what Lisa will need to do is go and shake the social workers again and remind them that they have a responsibility to identify CSE risk. And what we need to do is go beyond that dull compliance, and I'm filling a risk assessment to them because Lisa's told me I have to, and they need to know it and believe it and to do it in the best interests of the child. But it's not something to be overly concerned about, I would suggest, at this stage.
Thank you.
I was going to ask this question at corporate parenting time, but it is fitting for now. Sometimes the foster children of a more mature age group will know things that are going on between their peers. And I know they always protect them because they are a unit that looks and stands for each other. I think there might be vulnerability within that group, and will you be working with them, please?
Short answer is yes. I've had some early conversations with Lisa Mail because we are acutely aware that children will tell us what's happening with the children when they're worried about their friends. So the second sort of focus of our campaign over the summer was, well, tell us about your friends if you're worried about them, is the shorthand. And we're going to use, or we keep saying that makes me feel better, I'm going to go back to Lisa and I'm going to talk to some of our looked after children, our foster children, and ask them what signs and symptoms they'd see and what they'd know, and when they're worried about their friends, and how we need to get that message out to our looked after children and to the wild children's population, because they know about cool things about social media and they know about risks much better than I do. I'd like to think I do, but the reality is I absolutely don't. I'm 30 years too old for that, I think.
Thank you.
It's nice to hear you say that you're going to ask them how they engage with those, with that peer group. I think that's the key with all these things. Yes, some of us are a bit long in the tooth. You're not, I am. And it's not just about sort of the communication, as in different levels of communication. It's just actually that ability to talk to each other in different language sometimes. Are there any more questions before we wrap up on this one? I think there's going to be an expectation for you to come back and give us an update again. As we discussed, we're going to do a little bit of joint piece of work. Any literature that you've got at the moment that has already gone out, if you can pass that over to Tom so that he can send that over the papers, and we look forward to seeing the campaign coming out over this summer. Yes, John.
Do you want to have one quick question?
Never mind.
It's a practical question. There are lots and lots of papers that have been prepared for the panel. Have these papers been prepared specifically for this panel, or are they more general reports that have been written for a wider audience? I'm just thinking about the amount of work that's gone into these papers, really. I know it's a slightly off the cuff.
No, it's fine.
I think just to frame that a little bit, Tom and I have been talking about how best to support the panel going forward. A new panel, new chair, new vice chair, let's have a review of where we're going here. And so what we very much want to do, and when I say we, I want to do it and Tom's going to do it. Right, so that's how it works around here. Is set up a place on Biz, our intranet, that's for you, for your panel, and in that place we will put national reports that set, national research maybe, or point to policy, point to the direction the government's going in, and so on and so forth. And we will create a space for those things to go on. So if you turn on this paper that we've been looking at to page 8 of 9, you will see what Anne-Marie's done in preparing this report is reference electronically a number of background papers. Right? Now what we will do is we'll make those background papers always available to you electronically. We will not circulate those in hard copy, but they will be available to you. The covering covering report that we prepare for you are prepared for your panel. However, we try and do things once really well and use it multiple times. So, for example, the Child Sexual Exploitation report has gone to Children's Trust Board, it comes here, it'll go to the LSCB, the Local Safeguarding Children's Board and so on. So we write the covering reports to give you an up-to-date picture of where we are in Bournemouth, but we do very much encourage you to read around and have access to all the national stuff, which we will continue via Tom's good officers to provide for you on the intranet. He is smiling.
He loves it. Is it to do with the computer thingy? Programs, it's got a busy program. And likewise with the reports like this. I mean, that is not something that has been designed just for this panel.
I guess item 10 we're about to get to, simplification.
We are. So, thank you very much for that.